Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. You know, I'm doing very well today. How about you?
I'm doing great on this beautiful Monday morning here in Hampton. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the fifth stage of Kriya Yoga Pratyahara, sense withdrawal. Pratyahara is a series of breathing exercises and techniques that enables one to separate consciousness from sensual perception. Pratyahara enables one to separate the conscious mind from the bondage of the physical body and the instinctual drives. This marked by a person's ability to engage intelligence in decision-making. Now, the conscious mind becomes the central base of operation and is equipped to withstand influence. Listen as we discuss sense withdrawal as an important phase in human development. The term often used in the yoga community is detachment, and the advice is to be detached. However, this is misleading because we must be attached to something. We all have desire. The key to this stage is found in the yama, brahmacharya, carrier of Brahman. Once we have internalized the life force in the physical body so that the physical body desires nothing, then from this vantage point we can lift ourselves out of the grips of duality and gain objectivity. This stage is the first phase in the process of human development. Welcome to the Kriya Yoga, the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. So, Swami, so it seems like we have a lot to talk about today about Pratyahara. And I know last week we were reviewing one of your Theory 1 videos on Pratyahara, which was excellent. So how can we take such a broad subject and break it down for the half-hour show and give people the best benefit of this topic?
Well, the way I try and do it is that I try to explain to people that your first 4 stages of yoga are practices. And it will expand out into a path of action, a path of knowledge, and a path of devotion. But your second 4 stages of yoga are process. So your same practices that start out as skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise, will now be experienced at a different level of consciousness and a different degree of awareness. So Pratyahara really marks that phase in development where you now go into process. So it's not like, now I'm going to do pranayama, now I'm going to do Pratyahara. Okay, now let's do dharana, let's do dhyana, and now let's do samadhi. And one of the things that becomes maybe somewhat challenging to be able to evaluate is, when does pranayama become pratyahara? When does pratyahara become dharana? When does dharana become dhyana? And when does dhyana become samadhi? And that's all part of what we call apotheosis. You know, this process of this human being becoming something different, becoming an adult. And the evidence procedure starts with pratyahara, where the conscious mind actually separates, as we said in the opening, from body-bound awareness. It separates from being imprisoned by instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival. And you develop this phase in development where you are now intelligent, so that now you actually start to develop what we call your sheath system, your psychological organs, and you're able to process things using these mental functions, using perception, reason, memory, intuition. And it's not a given. It's one of the things that I think is really important for us to understand, that this concept of process is a much neglected area in our spiritual communities, that our lifestyle today really undermines our ability to be intelligent. It undermines these psychological organs, these sheath systems that we use in yoga. And as a result, for the most part, we're controlled by influences that are beyond our scope of power. So the dynamics, say, for example, of any addictive, compulsive behavior marks a phase where choice really isn't in the equation, that you are not able to overcome the force that you are being influenced by. So you're controlled by a force that's beyond your scope of power. And that's a very easy dynamic to be able to evaluate, because the average person today doesn't get out of it. And this whole concept of sense withdrawal isn't just taking the conscious mind out of the body and putting it into another coordinate in consciousness. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to understand this whole thing of brahmacharya in yoga, that it really is your connection to the life force. It's your connection to this other source of sustenance that makes this phase in development even possible. Because it is prana that actually gives us virtue to overcome fear. It's prana that gives us wisdom to overcome ignorance. It is this life force that gives us purpose to overcome selfishness. And it is this prana or life force that gives us enthusiasm so that we can overcome laziness. And it's all about this connection, not the conduct. And that's one of the biggest things that you notice, is that most people are trying to do pratyahara without the connection. And it's like trying to cut a tree down with a chainsaw without starting the saw up.
So what does it look like when somebody is trying to do pratyahara without the connection? What does that person look like? If you were to look at somebody, what would be the comprehensive clues that you would get from that person?
Well, for the most part, you see there's oftentimes a lack of success. You know, people that, go on diets and they're abstaining from a particular food, and then finally they go back to the old food or whatever. And, they reward themselves with that food. And so the deep changes that have to take place with regard to literally rebirthing the body and the life force have not happened. So they're not addicted to the void or the nothing. They're still searching. Their body is still longing for, a substance, a circumstance, a situation. It does not matter what your unnecessary dependency is. Whatever your addiction is, it is internalized in your body. and your body is seeking it. And until we actually change the reward circuits in the brain, until we change these neurological pathways, we continue to look for something visible and tangible for validation. And that's where the Kriya Yoga that we teach is just so, I want to say, well-structured, so that once you put this brahmacharya, this carrier of Brahman in place, then your practice actually has power, that it's not a struggle to adhere to dietary recommendations, to adhere to an exercise program, to follow your yamas, to live a life that is principle-centered. None of this is difficult. To have a sense of purpose comes with the connection.
So I want to talk a minute about detachment, and that's a phrase, or that's a word that is thrown about in the spiritual community a lot, and I'd like to have you explain detachment. I think a lot of people feel that to be detached means that you become uncaring or aloof, so what is the difference between being detached and somebody who's just experiencing or showing a sense of aloofness?
Yeah, the whole thing is you've got to be really careful with this, because it isn't just being detached. You don't want to dangle. And that's what we said in the opening. I mean, we all have desire. And desire is what drives your life. And it's not a bad thing. It's not something you want to get rid of, or that is even possible to get rid of. So you can't get rid of desire, but you can desire this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. You can now change what it is that you do desire, which gives you a different return. And to be detached successfully in the spiritual community means you want to be detached from duality. You want to be detached from things that are visible and tangible. But you can't just dangle. And it's kind of like, I remember years ago there was a story of somebody who goes to this very renowned teacher and wants to learn to become spiritual, and the teacher tells this aspirant to lift one leg. And of course the person lifts the leg and then says, now lift the other leg. So he puts that leg down and then lifts the other leg, and this guru or teacher, whatever, says you can only exercise half your will. And I've always thought that was really kind of interesting. So the whole concept of levitation, the whole concept of lifting both legs off of the ground at the same time. And we struggle with stuff like this, and we try and think that there are people out there that actually do this stuff. And we kind of make this unattainable goal or whatever somewhat seemingly supernatural, and that's what we call being spiritual. But in reality, if you wanted to lift both legs off the ground, if you grabbed something with your hands outside the earth, like if there was a bar above your head and you grabbed it, and then you could lift your legs off of the ground, that's basically how you do it spiritually. You get this other source of sustenance in your body, which now, kind of like we always say, a monkey won't let go of one branch unless it has another branch in the other hand. So we get this other branch in both our hands in order to detach ourselves from duality, in order to lift ourselves out of this limited perspective of just seeing ourselves as separate. And its detachment really requires attachment to this other source of sustenance. And then, of course, now you have the capacity to be objective as opposed to just dangle. It's, like jumping off of the earth, gravity pulls you right back. And that's what we kind of call detachment. That I let go, but then I'm pulled back. I let go, and then I'm pulled back. Whereas in this model, you're able to lift yourself out of duality because you have attachment to a different source of sustenance.
Oh, wow, that was a great explanation. But we're going to hold that thought and pause to hear a word from our sponsor. So, listeners, we'll be back in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So we are talking about Pratyahara this morning, and I want to continue talking about how to use intelligence with this, with the idea of sense withdrawal. So I don't want our listeners to get confused about, to be confused about feelings and emotions and our senses, because we're still in this physical body. We still have these certain senses. So I want to make sure there's a clear understanding between sense withdrawal, what that really means, and how to be intelligent about sense withdrawal. We don't want to stop living, but we need to be able to understand really exactly what is that.
Yeah, the whole thing is we make a very clear distinction between feeling and emotion. And that when you practice yoga, you literally operate from a heightened sense of awareness, acute sensitivity. You're not void of feeling. But by the same token, you're not emotional. See, emotion is just that. It means put into motion. It means that we are reactive, or, as I said earlier, you're controlled by feelings. And the concept of being intelligent requires you to be able to, rather than just automatically respond to stimuli, to actually tailor a response using mental functions, that you process it. And a big part of this processing of your response is being able to kind of organize and compartmentalize psyche so that you have perception, you have reason, you have feeling or memory, and you have intuition. And the way that would play out is that you get your information through the senses. Then you organize that information so that you can systemize and categorize. And then there's always experience, memory. What happened the last time? And then intuition, which is our ability to fabricate probable realities, to take consideration for consequences. That if I do this, there's a possibility of this, this, and this to happen. That's a very different response than if you automatically react unconsciously to stimuli. And whether we realize it or not, that a lot of the practices that we do in yoga are all geared towards earning this position, so that you are not, like we said earlier, controlled by forces beyond your scope of power, beyond your conscious control.
So say we're on our computer and we can't get a connection. So a lot of people would have this, this feeling of frustration and then maybe anger or whatever. But so how does somebody take a situation, any situation, I just use that as an example, to detach themselves, detach that feeling from that experience?
Yeah, the way that it works is that you don't negate it. And doesn't mean that being spiritual means that you're never going to be frustrated, you're never going to be disappointed, you're never going to be sad. But what it means is that you won't be totally immobilized or controlled or consumed by these feelings. That, again, coming back to what we said, that you can look at a situation and not negate it, but you make it smaller. I want to be online. I want to be able to, or you're stuck in traffic. I'm late for work. All of this, you don't negate it, but you reduce it. I'm not in danger. That the forces that are really important to me are still intact. And so you can actually take a breath, internalize it, because your body is looking for breath, not to be at work. And so what it is that we look to validate ourselves, what it is that we do in this process between symbols and feelings. Am I okay? How do I know I'm okay? And when you're using what you really do need to satisfy that feeling, when the availability of your next breath is producing the feeling that you're okay, now you can recognize that I'm late for work. I may even lose my job, but by the same token, I'm not going to die. So you've just reduced the experience and made it more manageable, which to me becomes the ultimate coping skill.
We have said in our summary at the beginning of the show that once we have internalized the life force in the physical body so that the physical body desires nothing. Now, some people might think nothing as being nothing. But what we mean in Kriya Yoga, nothing is meaning the life force, or whatever your concept of divinity is. So I think that's very interesting. As a matter of fact, I wore one of our yoga T-shirts, or school T-shirts, the other day, and somebody says, "Oh, nothing in excess," and I think they think it's okay that they can have as many Hershey bars as they want. They don't understand that nothing meaning the life force.
Right. That's a very important interpretation of the phrase. And that's one of the things that we do a lot of times, try and make, again, distinctions. That humans in the larvae state think nothing in excess means anything in moderation. But the human in the adult state recognizes that nothing in excess really means to indulge yourself in the life force so that you are not abstaining from things visible and tangible, but you are actually reveling in your new addiction, that desiring nothing is actually a very proactive dynamic that you internalize in your body. But just look at what you did for yourself. If you're longing for a cup of coffee, or you're longing for money or for anything visible and tangible, even if you get it, it's not going to fulfill what it is that you're looking for. And it will deteriorate into the nature of greed. You're going to want more. And the reason is because it's a dualistic image. It's in half, and it's fear and limitation. It's basically, it can't give you what it is that you're really looking for, which is to be a whole person. And this void, or this nothing, this indivisible unified field, this thing that was called God, is the only thing that gives us this positive, fulfilling feeling in the body that I'm okay without this insatiable craving.
So now what we said in that description, that the physical body has to desire nothing, the life force. But what about the mental body? Do you have to intelligently desire nothing, the life force as well?
Right, that's basically how it is. You train the mind to look for this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. And then, of course, you condition your body to internalize it. And through repetition comes absorption, and until eventually matter and mind come together with this other resource. And that's when you have what was called your conversion. You went from a human being that was seeking things visible and tangible, particles and waves, to now a human being that was seeking this unified field, this tree of life.
Now, that's what you meant in the summary when we said that we can lift ourselves out of the grips of duality and gain objectivity. So we gain objectivity intelligently. So in other words, being stuck in traffic or not getting connected to the internet, now we can look at this situation, with calmness and, like in the description, objectivity. We're not flying off the handle because we can't get what we want.
Right, or we're not responding as if we're in danger. Your heart's not racing, your hands aren't sweating, you're not reacting emotionally. And that's the true, I want to say, use of, or the way that the term detachment should work in a spiritual or a mystical or a metaphysical system.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, wow, what a great show, great information. But I believe it's about that time. We do have to start closing down our program. So listeners, I'd like to invite you out there to visit our website, and that is www.ipdtransform.com. And you can also follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and, of course, Facebook. And once there, you can post comments about this show or give us ideas for shows you may want Swami to consider. But keep those comments, questions, curiosities coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. Be sure to tune in next week. I believe we're going to be discussing about the new moon in Leo. That's going to happen, I believe, August 2nd. So, Swami, any other final thoughts or comments about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to be objective and cool, calm, collected as they approach their day, with employing intelligence over feeling or emotion. And again, invite people to come and listen to our show next week on that new moon in Leo, which brings loyalty. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.